Today's episode of the Riderflex podcast is sponsored by our friends at Truman's, a company that's taking the clutter out of cleaning. Seriously, have you ever noticed the hundreds of single-use cleaning bottles filled with toxic ingredients at the store? Well, Truman's is fixing all of that with a lineup of non-toxic cleaners and refill cartridges. Check them out at trumans.com. And on today's episode of the Riderflex podcast, I want to share a true story with you. Just a couple of days ago, a buddy of mine calls me. He had just gotten laid off from his job. He's probably mid-50s. He knows I work at recruiting firm Riderflex, so he was looking for some advice and wanted to see if we had anything that we were working on that matched his skill set, etc. First, let me just say I can sympathize with folks like that. It's super emotional to be laid off from a job. It's stressful for you and your family. It's stress on your personal finances, and it's an ego hit for sure. And if you're older, it's also scary as hell to be in your mid to late 50s and get laid off because now you're worried that nobody else will hire you, etc. So first, just let me say I sympathize with anybody that is going through that right now as you listen to this episode, or anybody that has gone through it. I know it's super tough. Anyway, back to my story and the point of this episode. He calls and he says, "Hey, can you help me out? What should I do?" etc. And I said, Johnny's not his real name. I said, "Johnny, first send me your resume and I'll see, what it looks like, because we have candidate services here at Riderflex. We can help people with their resumes." I said, "Send me your resume. Let me take a look. I'll see if it matches anything we're working on. Plus I'll get you in the database." And he says, "Steve," he goes, "I really don't have a resume. I haven't had a resume in like 15 years and it's not up to date, etc." And I said, "Okay." I said, "The first thing we need to do is get your resume built." Now, the challenge with that is he hadn't done a good job of keeping track of all the accomplishments or things that he had done over the years, stats, figures, things like that. So now he has to scramble and try to dig all this stuff up, right? And try to remember everything that he's done, whether it's building revenue or turning around operations or, implementing a project or leading a project of some kind or implementing a new, system, whatever. If you don't keep up on all the things that you're doing in your career as you move along, it's hard to go back and gather that information and put them on paper. It really is. And it's super time consuming too. So he didn't have a resume. And then I said, "Well, let me take a look at your LinkedIn profile." And he said, "Well, I don't have a LinkedIn profile either." I said, "Okay." And then he goes, and I've heard this before, "Yeah, I just didn't think I needed one. It was a big company. I've been there a long time. Didn't ever think that I, had to keep up with stuff like that." He went on to say that he hadn't really checked any of his social media in years, so he has no idea what's on his social media, crazy pictures or anything like that. What's my point of this episode? I've said this before in different episodes, but I'll say it again. I don't care how secure you think you are in your job. I don't care how long you've been there. I don't care how financially healthy you think your company is. Layoffs can come at any time, and they're usually unexpected. I know a lot of you out there, I've seen it. A lot of you are like, "Oh, I've been here for a long time. This is a Fortune 500 company, blah, blah, blah." Keeping your resume updated and your LinkedIn updated and monitoring your social media, it's almost like car insurance. It's like auto insurance, right? Rarely do you ever need it, but on that day you do have a wreck, you got to be able to reach in the glove compartment and pull out the little insurance card. My advice to anybody listening to this podcast is always work on your resume. Maybe once a month, right? Even if it's once a quarter, put a reminder in your calendar, go in, update your resume with different accomplishments, etc. Look at your LinkedIn profile, get rid of the 10-year-old picture. Okay. update some things on your LinkedIn, be active on LinkedIn a little bit so that you're networking and building relationships. By the way, that's the other thing this guy didn't do, right? So he hadn't been building any new relationships, no new connections. I mean, same thing. If you're not building relationships and networking a little bit and active a little bit on some of these professional sites, it's going to be harder to get going if you get laid off. So will Johnny find a job eventually? Probably, right? I mean, unemployment's super low. I mean, he's going to find something, but he may not find what he wants right away, and he's behind the 8 ball. Now it's going to take him some time to get all this stuff ready. So he's losing, weeks, if not months, because he's just behind. And if he had been working his LinkedIn profile and had been up to date, he could call a few people he knows in different types of industries other than just what he's in. That's the other thing about networking and being on social media, especially on LinkedIn. If you're building relationships and networking outside of your current company and maybe even outside of your current industry, you can call people faster. You can open doors quicker. So if you're 50 plus years old listening to this episode, please update your resume 3 or 4 times a year. Keep your LinkedIn updated. You never know. It's like auto insurance. And there is your Riderflex tip of the day. The Riderflex podcast features entrepreneurs, business executives, and the stories behind how they got there, as well as daily tips on career advice and job interviews. Our show can be heard just about anywhere these days, but you can visit riderflex.com and click on the podcast page to hear all the previous episodes and learn more about the recruiting and consulting services we provide. Contact us at the email address info@riderflex.com or 888-964-5876. Thanks so much for listening, and if you enjoy our show, please be sure to subscribe to our channel and like the episodes.